Zia Yusuf, let's first of all have your reaction to the reshuffle. Angela Rayner out, David Lammy in as Deputy Prime Minister. The one person who has been safe in this reshuffle has been the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, of whom you have been particularly critical.
Yeah.
Is this a missed opportunity for the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, Rachel Reeves, the fact that he hasn't sacked Rachel Reeves is testament to the utter paucity of talent available to this Prime Minister. I mean, Rachel Reeves has been the architect of the accelerating decline of the British economy. We're seeing our 30-year bond gilts now at multi-decade highs. Britain pays more for debt now to finance its debt than Greece. If you look at the interest payments alone in our national budget, 1 in every 12 pounds of taxpayer spending is now to pay interest. And what has Rachel Reeves done since she became Chancellor? She's added she's increased national insurance contributions. It's a tax on jobs. And what happened? There were fewer jobs, right? A lot of people have been taken off the payrolls. She's the inheritance tax rate on farmers, obviously the appalling situation in terms of the winter fuel allowance that they told nobody about. And now, if you look at what's being rumored, well-sourced rumors about the next budget, her latest harebrained idea, taxing people on their primary residences, something that is, hasn't been known for decades. And then also talking about adding national insurance to rent for landlords. All that's going to do is increase rent prices even more. So one of the criticisms of Rachel Reeves has often been she doesn't get second and third order consequences. This is first order consequences of her decision.
So why has he kept her there? Because she is, according to Ipsos, one of the least popular politicians in the country now.
Yeah. Well,
so what's your theory?
Because this Labour government is utterly devoid of talent. And look, if you want evidence for that, I've said this before, I think we will get an earlier general election than 2029, but you better hold on to your hats because we're going to get something worse than Starmer and worse than Reeves. And look what's happened with Angela Rayner. She's been replaced by David Lammy.
Yes.
I mean, they managed to find the only human being in the country less qualified than Angela Rayner to be the deputy prime minister.
David Lammy isn't here to defend himself, and he will say, unlike you, that he is an elected representative, and therefore at least he has constituents, which you don't, which would be a fair point, wouldn't it?
It would be a point, but anyone
He's been voted in.
Go and look at the public utterances of David Lammy for many, many years. This is a man who insulted President Trump in the most egregious ways, knowing full well there was a meaningful chance to be the next president of the United States. Sure, I'm articulating my opinion.
Right. Are you going to run to be an MP then when the time comes?
I would like to. Yeah.
Could that be 2027 then? What event do you think will precipitate an early general election? We heard this from Nigel Farage in his speech.
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine that Labour would right now be turkeys voting for Christmas. So how do you come up with this? It's 2 years before we thought it would be theory.
Well, we're not saying it will be 2027. We're saying we must be prepared for such an eventuality. It would be wrong to not do that, given how many millions of people in the country are placed so much faith and hopes in us doing so. Here's how such a scenario could occur. Number one, look, of course, the way the British system works is that Starmer would have to call such an early election.
He won't do that.
Well, so here's how it could happen. Number one, more stress in the financial markets. So already our 30-year borrowing costs are reaching multi-decade highs. We haven't yet seen the stress in the short-term credit markets, CDSs, shorter duration gilts. That hasn't yet happened. But I worked in the city during the time of the Greek sovereign debt crisis. When that arrives, it's a bit like bankruptcy. It's very gradually, then all at once. One of the things the markets are looking at is whether Britain is going to obey the fiscal rules. The bond markets do not care, Camilla, whether, British kids get good schooling, whether people are struggling. They just care about being paid. And the clue as to what's coming once Rachel Reeves goes, and I think she is on borrowed time, quite literally, is when she started crying on the front bench, regardless of what anyone's view is on that, you saw a big gap down in British bonds. And the reason for that was they were terrified about what might come after her. And sadly, I think Nigel will be the Prime Minister at some point, but I think we're going to see, I think Rachel Reeves is going to be gone reasonably soon. I think Starmer will go reasonably soon after that. I think the people that come after them inside Labour will be way worse, and the markets, there's a real chance of a real big problem for Britain in the bond market.
Let's talk about reform. You're not ready, are you? Not ready now for 2027?
Well, we are... The amount of work that has already been done and it's in flight is huge. We're working really, really hard. One of the reasons Nigel said that on the stage is because he knows more than anybody that we're going to get one shot at this. The country, the people here at this conference, so much effervescent enthusiasm, despite the appalling state of the country, despite reformers. There's some polling that came out that said 89% of reform voters are extremely pessimistic about the economy over the last couple of years. The word pessimism doesn't come to mind here. It's optimism. Why? Because they have faith that Nigel will get us ready for that. That's the work that we're doing right now.
But you need a load more candidates. So how many more Tories are you going to pick off?
Well, look, I think the first thing to say on that is if you look at what's happened over the last 14 and a half months, we've gone from 14% support in the general election to anywhere between 32 and 35% today, depending on the polls. The majority of that new support has come from people who didn't even vote in the last general election.
Okay.
And if you look at Runcorn and Helsby, where Sarah Pochin brilliantly won that seat, that was a Labour stronghold, not a Tory stronghold. And so, yes, we're going to take probably some people who are Tories. There are some good people there. But we're going to take far, far more people who have never been in politics before. I was on the record yesterday with the Telegraph saying, I think, because Nigel had already said this, that in terms of the cabinet, Nigel's first cabinet, if the British people see fit to elect him as Prime Minister, probably about half won't be from the political world. There will be people that we appoint into the Lords who will be people who have achieved great things and achieved excellence in the real world.
But isn't there a contradiction at the heart of the likes of Nadine Dorries, Jake Berry and Andrew Jenkins all being members of Reform now? These were the very people that were in Boris Johnson's government that you have been hypercritical of. Mm-hmm. If you could blame anyone for squandering a right-leaning majority, then it's Boris Johnson, who presided over record high taxes and record high immigration.
Yep.
So why are you taking on these people?
Well, so number one, you're not going to find any defense of Boris Johnson's record from me.
But Nadine Dorries is like his bestie.
Well, Nadine Dorries was obviously formerly one of Boris's closest allies. What she said on the front page of the Daily Mail this morning, Camilla, the Tory party is dead. Okay. The Tory party is dead. And she's also said, to the degree there are people out there still who would say they would vote Tory, and there's a lot fewer than there were, but there are still some. She said, and I quote, "Wake up and smell the coffee. The Tory party is dead." We couldn't agree more with her about that.
Okay. When it comes to your legislative agenda, you've now been put in charge of policy. You're going to have this department for preparing for government.
Yeah.
Some of the policies that you're going to enact pretty quickly are going to be quite radical. Yeah. You're talking about stopping small boats in 2 weeks. That is going to require you to pass some pretty controversial legislation really quickly.
Yeah.
You therefore are going to need a super majority, a stonking majority. You can't just scrape through at the next general election. Do you agree? You need big numbers.
Well, I've been saying, I spoke to Chris Hope about 8-10 months ago, and he asked me, how many seats do you think Reform will win at the next election? And I said this not on the basis that it was expected, but this is what we believed was possible. And I said 350 to 400. Okay. And he sort of recoiled a bit and said, are you serious? Well, if you look at the latest polls today, and we take nothing for granted, the latest computation of those polls put us close to 400 seats. So yes, we need a serious majority, but it's also important we have a mandate, because Nigel's going to be the most transformative Prime Minister of our lifetimes. Unlike this appalling Labour government, they didn't tell anybody about any of what their plans were and then did awfully unpopular things.
Okay.
We are going to tell the British people what we're going to do. We're going to ask them for a mandate, and I think they'll give Nigel that mandate.
There's already some confusion about how many people you're going to deport, because you're saying 288,000. Nigel's saying 500,000 to 600,000. How many people are you deporting? Give us a figure.
Yeah, so
which is it?
So I've been saying consistently that the 288,000 figure is a function of the fact that we're talking about 24,000 detention beds, right? And so what that means is, so the operational plan that we have put together means that our assumption is, and it works on the basis that nobody would be detained for more than 30 days. That's how you ramp up to 5 flights a day. So what that would allow us to do is have the ability, therefore, that's why we want to have that much detention capacity. So at peak speed, we would be able to deport 288,000. When in the real world, and there is precedent for this, President Obama, people don't know this, but a lot of people don't know this. President Obama deported 3 million people.
Yes.
He deported 3. He was America's deporter in chief.
No, he did
and when you look
more
at the
in
numbers,
Guantanamo than some of the Republican
and so when you look at the numbers, they aren't just a straight line. So we've got to be realistic, but we're also very ambitious.
Okay.
We think there's north of 1 million people in the country illegally. We want to have the ability to ramp those deportations to 288,000 every single
All right.
week. That's why we want 24,000 detention beds.
Quick couple of questions to end with. You're happy to pay the Taliban taxpayers cash?
Camilla, this year, the United Kingdom is going to hand over 151 million pounds of
Right.
British taxpayers' money. People watching this program, 151 million quid of their money is going to go to Afghanistan in the form of foreign aid.
Okay.
The first thing we're going to do is say, you know what? I think it's reasonable to say that if British taxpayers are giving you that aid, the least you could do is take back your illegal migrants.
All right. And you mentioned Sarah Runcorn earlier, Sarah Pochin earlier, the MP for Runcorn, I should say. She's brought back this debate over banning the burqa. She's told the Telegraph that it isn't in line with British culture and should be banned. Where are you on this? Because this has previously sparked a bit of a row within Reform, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a false... I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. My personal opinion, and again, it's not formal form policy, I was on the record very quickly about that, saying I would support a ban, it's my personal opinion, a ban on all public face coverings. That would include the burqa. Because listen, Camilla, in a Western liberal democracy, human interaction, which is critically important, is facial in no small
So do you
part.
reckon that's going to be in a future Reform manifesto, banning the burqa?
Don't know yet. We'll have to see. But I agree with her on that. But I would also say this. I would also say it's also going to apply to Antifa thugs that face down our supporters and intimidate them when trying to come to our event. And so many people tell us, and this happened to me too, you're walking down the street and on the pavement, somebody's walking towards you wearing a face covering. What do? You cross the road. And we live in cities in the UK, there's so much CCTV.
Yeah.
So basically, that surveillance is becoming opt-in. And the very people who you probably would want to be surveilled are opting out of it by wearing these masks. So my personal view is we do need to have a ban on public face coverings. And I agree with Sarah.
All right. Zia Yusuf, thank you very much indeed for joining me at the Reform Conference in Birmingham.
Thanks for having me.